So then here's the overview. So I'll kind of do a little introductory stuff up front to give everyone a frame of reference, but then most of the focus here will be on the parameter extraction and equivalent medium parameter retrieval for the metamaterials, which will hopefully help us streamline our kind of design of metamaterials. But then most of the focus here will be on the parameter extraction and equivalent medium parameter retrieval for the metamaterials, which will hopefully help us streamline our kind of design of metamaterials. And then last will be on future work and basically all the stuff I'm going to pawn off on Lieutenant Ed Wolf. So high-power microwave weapons. The weapons themselves kind of went beyond the scope and classification level of my thesis. However, I just wanted to introduce them real fast so that everyone kind of knows what the threat is and what it is we're designing metamaterials to shield against. So high-power microwave weapon is basically a weapon that uses a very high-gain microwave source at a very high peak power over a very short dwell time. And the idea is that it's trying to induce a very large electric field at a target so that you produce some overload in their circuitry and disable their electronics. And so depending on your target, the effects can be variable. If you're talking about a vehicle, like a ground vehicle, you might merely stop it or shut it down. And then if you're talking about something that flies like a missile or an aircraft, the goal would be to knock out something like their flight control system so that it goes plummeting to the ground. So kind of ranging from soft kill to hard kill, depending on what you're trying to do. And then a lot of nations around the world are researching these weapons because they have a lot of advantages relative to other directed energy weapons like lasers or particle beams. The first one is because you're doing high peak powers over short dwells, you get a relatively low energy waveform. So while these high power microwave weapons can still have pretty big size and weight, their power and cooling requirements can be lower compared to other systems, in particular like the particle beams. The other nice thing about them is that they're highly adaptable to your target set. When you're talking about lasers, you tend to get one frequency to use, and if the enemy figures out a way to either reflect or disperse that frequency, then your laser becomes a lot less effective. But with microwaves, if you happen to know that your target set, if your enemy uses missiles with seekers in the X-band or drones with communications in the K-band, you can build a high-power microwave system that specifically attacks that bandwidth, and then it's very hard to defend against. And then the last big advantage, you just heard from Donnie about how atmospheric turbulence affects lasers, and then particle beams are also almost impossible to get through an atmosphere. Microwaves don't have that problem. They propagate readily through the atmosphere, which is why we use them for sensing and communication and all that stuff. So this chart just kind of shows where these high-power microwave weapons live relative to more traditional systems like radars or jammers. And so your ideal high-power microwave weapon would be in this bottom right corner here, where you're talking about something on the order of gigawatts of peak power being produced by less than a kilowatt of average power. And then this down here is just a picture of a typical high-power microwave weapon system that someone was working on somewhere in the world sometime in the last decade. And so you have the big high-gain microwave dish on top, then presumably all the transmitters, signal processors, cooling, all that is hidden in the truck bed. So then our candidate shielding for stopping these microwave weapons is our microwave absorbent metamaterials. And so first advantage of the metamaterials is that they can have a very high levels of absorption, and they're very tunable to the frequency you want to absorb. So here's a sample metamaterial structure, very similar to the terahertz metamaterials, just scaled up in size. So you have conductive metal squares that are periodically, also that we call unit cells, that are patterned over this dielectric spacer. And then that in turn is mounted on a metal ground plane. And so then you can choose the frequency that you absorb based on the width of the squares and the index of refraction of the dielectric medium. Now, in terms of protection, what really gives you the protection against microwaves specifically is having this conductive ground plane, because microwaves don't want to transmit across a ground plane. So you could say in theory that you don't have to go for an absorbent design, you could just coat everything in conductive material. However, we're going for an absorbent solution because if you clad everything in conductive material, you're going to light up like a Christmas tree on all those microwave radars. So in the interest of preserving all these signature reduction platforms we've invested in, we want an absorbent design. The other advantage, which I'll talk about more during future work, is that once you have this absorption and these tuned frequencies, you can actually also use your shielding for sensing as well, once you incorporate the right electronics into the design. So your shielding can give you not only protection, but situational awareness as well. So this here is a very simple single band design. The idea then would be to try to get a broadband or multi-band design where you can actually laminate multiple resonator squares on top of each other, all separated by dielectric, which is kind of what we have down here. So here's a simulated mock-up of a kind of pyramid structure. This particular design that I tested had 6 resonator layers, so it can absorb 6 frequencies. Here's just a SEM micrograph kind of showing the edge of the unit cell. See, it's a little fuzzy, but you got the metal plates in there, all separated and mounted in dielectric with a ground plane at the bottom. So this design, there's some plates going around, so this is basically the unit cell of that array plate that's being passed around. And then this is just some crude experimental data with a crude model, but all I want to point out here is that with our 6 layers, we can see that we have 6 very predictable absorption peaks that we can tune